So let us move towards the first presentation for today, which is on GIFT City, Gujarat International Finance Tech City, often referred to as GIFT City, an ambitious development project located in the state of Gujarat, India. It is envisioned as a global financial and technology hub designed to attract international businesses and investors. To throw light on the said subject, I invite on stage Mr. Jugal Kajaria, Director Tax and Regulatory Services, India Financial Services Practice, Ernst & Young. So can we have a round of applause for Mr. Jugal Kajaria?
Thank you. A very good afternoon. I'm quite happy to be a part of this event. Would like to start off with thanking Delphin and the entire Marex team for inviting me on this topic of GIFT City. I think the introduction was quite well in terms of what GIFT City is, and with senior professionals from the maritime industry, I'm quite sure that you would have heard about GIFT City, what it entails, and what are the aspects around this. So in the next 25-30 minutes that I have, the entire objective that I want to get into is give you an overview of GIFT City, what has it been created really for, because all of us hear about this is an international financial services center, there are aspects in India, it has been notified, etc. So I'll just try to deep dive into it. Give an overview of what are the functions and aspects of businesses which are already operating over there, what is the state of vision of the government of India, which has a lot of focus on this zone because they are looking at this as one of the bigger sectors in the coming years to support the financial service sector, and also some case studies in terms of how shipping industry could be benefited out of this entire GIFT City ecosystem. So just to take few years back in terms of step back, in 2015 there was a lot of discussion in setting up an international financial services center, and that is where they try to benchmark it into what it entails. And that is where the government of India said we want to create a zone which is benchmarked to Singapore and Dubai, London, etc. And what does it entail? Basically, they envisaged this sector or this zone which was notified to be placed outside of India and not subject to any Indian exchange control regulations. This was deemed to be or notified to be placed outside of India. The biggest advantage of that is there are no capital account convertibility regulations or India FEMA regulations which apply to this zone. And this was done in 2019. This zone, they wanted to make it a financial services zone, wherein all the activities or work which was done from outside of India, be it in Singapore, be it in Dubai, be it in London, was to be onshored into the Indian shores. And that is where they created this entire concept or idea of GIFT City. It is India's only financial services zone, and to begin with, it was notified with the regulator or financial service regulator, RBI, IRDAI, etc., who were focusing on this zone as the financial service regulators for the respective zone. However, they realized in 2019 that it was not becoming completely productive, and in 2019, when everybody was going through the COVID era, they notified a unified regulator under the Ministry of Finance, which is the IFSCA or International Financial Services Authority. Now this was a sole unified authority parallel to RBI and IRDAI India to take care of all financial services regulations and activities which are to be done into that zone. And that is where the entire zone got set up. From a legal perspective, it is a SEZ, a special economic zone, which has been set up in the state of Gujarat between the city of Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, and it has been notified as a place outside of India from an exchange control of FEMA perspective. It also comes across with a lot of other benefits in terms of tax incentives and regulatory incentives, and I'll touch upon that. The ecosystem today, if we break it down, started off with banks, and then it got into aspects of insurance companies, reinsurance companies today, and ancillary service providers. There are a lot of finance companies also, and finance companies are specifically focused upon this because ship leasing and finance leasing is one of the activities along with aircraft leasing which is being set up in the GIFT City zone. Some of the players I try to put it across on the sheet are like Shipping Corporation has just been set up, Reliance has set up, Air India, Vistara have set up for the leasing activities, and there are many more in the pipeline. In all, there are around 30 plus entities which are in the ship leasing and aircraft leasing activities. This is a snapshot in terms of what this zone entails. As I mentioned, it started off with banking. There are 29 plus banks in GIFT. Then there were insurance companies, again 20 plus insurance companies in GIFT City, life and non-life. And there is recently a foreign reinsurer set up. CIC is the first Indian reinsurer which has set up in the GIFT City zone. There are capital market intermediaries, including 2 exchanges, which is NSE, BSE, and a commodity exchange also being set up in that zone. Also, from ancillary service providers, we have players like law firms, accounting firms, asset management companies which are set up in the zone. Moving on. This is a snapshot in terms of number of players in GIFT City. There are 25 banks and more, 140 plus funds. What is interesting to note is as this zone is growing, there are the number of assets on lease, which is the third column. There are around 30 plus assets on lease, which are aircraft lease and ship leasing lease, which are being set up in the GIFT City zone. Also, there are 30 plus companies in the GIFT City zone. If you see on the right hand side is a comparison between GIFT City when it started in September 2020 and where it stands today. Initially, there were only 100 plus entities, and today we stand around 600 plus entities across these sections, and these entities have done a huge amount of volume. Look at the asset size of banks. Today, the asset size of bank is around $60 billion in GIFT City. Similarly, when you look at the capital market transactions, the entire volume of SGX exchange has moved to GIFT City on the international exchanges. This is where the entire GIFT City ecosystem is growing, where the entire bouquet of financial services activities is proposed to be moved to the GIFT City zone. This is a snapshot of the incentives on GIFT City. The most important one is a 10 years tax holiday, which has been granted to units which get set up in the GIFT City zone. This tax holiday is in a block of 15 years. When it comes to non-residents which are trading or doing transactions with GIFT City units, there is a perpetual exemption when it comes to royalty, interest payments, which they keep with the GIFT City units. Basically, the logic is that if these transactions were to happen with a Singapore-based entity, it would have resulted in no tax income to India. And therefore, to create a parallel to that, the same incentive has been granted in the GIFT City zone. Then, because it is a SEZ zone, whatever goods get imported, including ships which get imported into this zone, are outside the custom duty, and therefore no custom duty applies to that. And then there are certain stamp duty exemptions. On the right hand side is, in the yellow box, is essentially the state incentives. Now this state incentives becomes very attractive, especially for large units which have or employ a large number of headcounts, like your GCCs or bookkeeping accounting services, which I will touch upon, because here the government of Gujarat gives incentives in the form of OPEX support and CAPEX support, which is around 15 to 25% of the expenses when it comes to you setting up those units. And therefore, look at a global capability center or back office which sets up in India. India already provides foreign players local arbitrage in terms of the cost. In addition to that, if you add state incentives, this becomes a really attractive proposition. snapshot of the finance company regulation in GIFT City. Finance company in GIFT City is nothing but simply a NBFC equivalent in India. The entire objective of this regulation is to create a lending entity for shipping purpose in the GIFT City. There are various activities which a shipping entity can do, as ship leasing activity can be done in that zone. What I highlighted is the core activities are the ones we will focus upon from a ship leasing perspective. Now, as you know, conceptually, financing will only contain finance lease, a financial activity. But in the GIFT City zone, the specific thing that they have notified is even operating lease is considered as a financial services in GIFT City. And to that extent, any entity which creates a lease, whether it's operating lease or finance lease out of the GIFT City, is considered to be financial activity and they can carry out those activities from the GIFT City. So therefore, various kind of charters, time charters, voyage charters, all of those could be done out of the GIFT City. I just tried to put across a comparison in terms of how this entire thing will work. On the left hand side is today the shipping business and this leasing business of shipping which works, right? You will have your shipping or leasing be done out of Singapore based or Dubai based entities, wherein at the time of making a payment to them, there is certain tax liabilities which arises to those overseas entities, which essentially adds to the cost of the transaction. If we take the diagram in the middle, which is a GIFT City entity, the GIFT City entity gets interposed in between. What happens is, the GIFT City entity will be one which will be leasing the asset. The objective of the government of India is that you lease this entire thing on the long-term period, which is entire life of the asset. However, to begin with, they have said that we want to develop this zone, and to that extent, we'll even allow operating lease done on a back-to-back basis out of the GIFT City. Now, if you break the entire transaction out, what will happen is, if the ship leaser leases out the asset to the IFSC GIFT entity, which is a finance company, any payments being interest or by the way of royalties, there will be no taxation, which is perpetual. Now, this is currently available only for units which are set up in GIFT City before 31st March 25. But however, it is expected that this benefit will get extended, that sunset clause. That is the part in terms of leasing in the asset to the GIFT City entity. When this asset gets leased out by the GIFT entity to a Indian entity which is using that asset for lease purpose, again the GIFT entity enjoys a 10 years tax holiday. And therefore, if you see in the entire chain, there is no tax liability arises. Add to that, there is no custom duty because the asset gets imported on into the GIFT City and it lies with the GIFT City entity which is the owner of that asset during the period of the lease, and therefore there is no custom duty benefits. So that is also available for a GIFT City entity. Now, today if you look at the, I'll just put you some numbers. If you see some numbers on screen, this is what the GIFT City ecosystem looks like. And I have tried to put a comparison between aircraft leasing and the GIFT leasing, because aircraft leasing started off slightly earlier. We have around 27 entities in the likes of Indigo, Vistara, Air India, which are set up in GIFT City, which are leasing aircrafts, private planes, aircraft engines, simulation equipments, and various other instruments. Vis-a-vis in GIFT City, ship leasing started off slightly later. There are 12 entities which are registered, and there are 12 assets in terms of ships which are leased out of the GIFT City. With the Shipping Corporation of India now coming in and just setting up in GIFT City, it is expected that these volumes, along with other players which are set up in GIFT City, is expected to grow and rise in the coming days and years. I just put down some numbers in terms of what are the types of assets, which is the ships, aircraft, engines, etc., which are leased. Around more than 160 assets have been leased out of GIFT City. So this is in terms of the shipping. There are certain other additional benefits also from a GIFT City perspective. Sorry for this. it from there. This is an interesting one if you see from a gift city perspective. Again, I tried to put a diagram. On the left hand side was the overseas lenders which were lending to Indian entities. Indian entities have been borrowing this money under the external commercial borrowing route. Now this entire lending as per the market practice has been that any tax cost is to be grossed up by the borrowers in India. It essentially adds to the cost of the borrowers. Till 30th of June 2020, this rate was merely 5%, which was not a big amount, which were typically borne by the borrowers. However, after that it has become 20% because the sunset clause has been taken away. And therefore it starts pinching the borrowers. So there are treaty conditions, etc. to be looked at. And therefore, when you come to the gift city, which is the diagram on the right hand side, there is 0% taxes which arises in this structure when a banking unit out of gift city grants a loan to an Indian entity under the exchange control external commercial borrowing route. This results in savings of 50 to 100 basis points on a borrowing, which is becoming very attractive, and therefore a lot of banks in India as well as foreign banks have shut down their foreign operations and moved the India businesses to gift city. Today the size of the assets in the last 3 years has become $60 billion of the balance sheets of banks on an aggregate basis. Global treasury is another aspect in gift city which people are looking at. This is agnostic to the industry because what people are looking at is treasury activities of group lending, managing the receivables in the global arena was being done in places like Bermuda and other such jurisdictions which were tax havens. Which a global minimum taxation of 15% coming in, they are looking at moving their treasury centers to gift city because along with their India operations, the jurisdictional blending will result into tax saving for them, and therefore they are looking at the global treasury. Even Indian entities with an outbound presence are creating global treasuries, including holding company structures in gift city, including movement of cash. And this is one of the last activities in terms of non-financial services players doing in gift city, which is the bookkeeping, accounting, taxation. So basically these regulations were introduced with an objective that this zone is done on the western coast of India with a lot of chartered accountants and accountant professionals operating out of that. And therefore this zone is created with an objective that all of these activities, which is bookkeeping, accounting and taxation, can be rendered to any industry, financial services or otherwise, to non-resident entities or non-resident clients. And towards this, a lot of players, including technology companies, including foreign players in the pharma sector, airline sector, are looking at, and shipping sectors, are looking at setting up in gift city with an objective of doing these activities. The benefit here is 10 years tax holiday, state incentives, which reduces the cost of operations, and in addition to that, all your savings or incomes continue to be in dollar terms. As a result of which, the dollar depreciation is not impacted on the business. So these are this is an overview of the gift city. I'm assuming I'm on time right now. I think I have 5 more minutes. I would be happy to take any questions on the gift city ecosystem if there are any, and happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
There's also talk about setting up second register for Indian ships in the gift city. Can you tell us about that?
Sorry?
Second register for Indian ships in gift city, IFSCA. Do you know? Can you shed some light on that, please?
So as of now, what is happening is in gift city, the entire ecosystem for ship leasing is coming up. So what is happening is people are actually setting up new units and doing operating leases only. So all of the complex transactions, which are typically done out of Singapore and other jurisdictions, we will see them happening, but once the basic platforms have been set up. The only other thing which I thought I should mention is even on the insurance companies coming in GIFT City, there will be ability for them to do insurance better because the products will be in dollars and the investments etc. will also be in dollars. So that is another benefit which will arise to the ship leasing industry per se.
Yeah, well, that's not leasing, it's actually the registering of ships that we are talking about. Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned about the tax facilities to companies. My question is that other than the facilities enjoyed by the company itself, the founders of the company and equity holders and directors, their status remains as a resident even if they are based in GIFT City. Is that correct? Or they are personally treated as non-resident?
No. So you are right, this question does come up on a lot of time. When it comes to the entity which is set up in GIFT City, from an income tax perspective, it is considered as resident in India and it enjoys certain tax benefits. The founders of the units or entities in GIFT City are also considered resident, whether they operate out of GIFT City or they are in mainland India. So they do not get any benefit of tax residency. So if you set up a unit and you are getting a dividend, it will be subject to normal taxation. However, if the founders happen to be non-resident, okay, and any dividends which go out of that entity, that enjoys a lower withholding rate in India of 10%. Okay. Additionally, if the founder is also putting in the money in that entity in the form of interest, which is a debt funding, that enjoys a perpetual tax holiday for the recipient of the income, which is the founder in our example, on any interest which gets received. No? Okay. Thank you.